Welcome to the Connor's Corner segment of Ask the Lawyer. As many of you know, my wife Beth and my son Michael are big science fiction fans. And at the same time, I'm a big fan of Westerns. And right now, our guest was very prominent in both mediums. The great character actor, Earl Holliman. How you doing today, sir?
I've been better. How are you?
Oh, you've been better? Well, I'm doing pretty good.
Well, that's good.
Now, I was surprised to find out when I was looking over your biography. They said that you did the absolutely first Twilight Zone?
Yes, I had. I tell you, I had the good fortune. I did 16 films before I ever did any television, which is kind of usually you break into TV and then get into films. But I was fortunate in doing the reverse, and I wanted to do good live TV. So I got in. I did a Playhouse 90. Do you remember Playhouse 90?
Sure.
For those who don't, it was a 90-minute show. It was done on CBS, and it was done live, every week, a live drama. And this one was directed by Arthur. Name goes right out of my head, but the guy who directed Bonnie and Clyde and
Arthur Penn.
Exactly. And it was written by Rod Serling, and it's called The Dark Side of the Earth. And I co-starred with 3 Oscar winners, Tim Hunter and Dean Jagger and Van Heflin. It was a wonderful piece, and I got to know Rod Serling quite well. He was a terrific guy, just a terrific down-to-earth guy. And a year later, I was doing another one of those and ran into him in the parking lot, and we got to talking. And I said, "What are you up to?" And he said, "I've just written a pilot for a science fiction show." And he said, "As a matter of fact," he said, we'd offered it to, I think he said Tony Curtis, but he said he wanted too much money, and which was his, he had a right to that. But he said, I'm going to send you the script. But now I had done Forbidden Planet, and where most of my scenes were with Robbie the Robot. And I thought, oh gosh, another science fiction thing with 30 guys aboard a spaceship. And I got the script, and I sat down at dinner that night to read it. And I just pushed my dinner aside. Every page was Mike Ferris, which was my character. There was nobody else in it. And so I left it. I loved it. I loved the whole idea of doing it. And it turned out to be the pilot for the piece, the one that Rod took back to New York to sell to the sponsors and to CBS. They were a little leery about doing a science fiction show. And they kept it on a certain believability level at that time. They were afraid to do anything that was really offbeat. But anyway, I was honored that he chose me to do it. And nobody knew that it was going to be, here we are, what 60 years later or 70, whatever we are. It was done in 1959. And, that was went on the air in 1959. So we're still talking about it, and it turned out to be a terrific show, terrific series.
Terrific series, terrific opening show. Now, you talked about Forbidden Planet, and that, again, is one of those classics, 60-some-odd years after it was made, people are still watching it on TV.
I know, isn't it amazing? It's not just on TV, but occasionally they'll have special showings of it. I've had special screenings I've been invited to, all my scenes were with Robbie the Robot, so anyway, it was it was a little offbeat, a little difficult. But it's certainly turned. All these guys like Steven Spielberg and Abrams and all these fellows who do science fiction pieces, they've all referred to Forbidden Planet as an inspiration for them when they were younger.
And then some of our younger listeners haven't seen it. There were other members of the cast that did pretty well later on, like Leslie Nielsen.
Like Leslie Nielsen, absolutely, yeah. Who knew that he was so funny?
Right. Well, did you know that back then?
No. Well, when we all sat down to have a beer after, the 4 of us, 5 of us, he had a nice sense of humor, but who knew he could be so outrageously funny? It's marvelous. He's a very talented guy and a very nice guy. But, I find in this business, I've only worked with nice people. I've always really been lucky. I guess, the directors I worked with were top directors and a lot of top movie stars. It was wonderful. I've had a terrific career. I don't mean to brag about it. I just am so fortunate. I feel great about that. I wanted to be an actor since I was 6 years old, so as a matter of fact, when I was 14, I left home. My dad had died. And I kind of slipped away and had my 15th birthday on the highway. I hitchhiked to Hollywood from Louisiana to get into the movies. I was out here a whole week. Went back. Of course, I went back home and went back to high school. But before I finished high school, I joined the Navy again when I was 15. Lied about my age. Came out here again to go to boot camp in San Diego, and then was shipped up to Los Angeles to radio school in the Navy. And I was here for quite some time. And every other night we had liberty, and I would hitchhike or take the old PE car and go to the Hollywood canteen and dance with the young starlets, or talk to Joan Crawford or Susan Hayward. And I mean, I was like in hog heaven. It was like, like I died and gone to heaven. Interestingly enough, a lot of the people that I talked to in those days, later we worked together. I've had a very blessed, fortunate career.
Now, I remember you mostly from Westerns, and you're talking about directors. You were with Henry Hathaway in The Sons of Katie Elder. You were with Sturgis in Gunfight at the OK Corral.
But also with Sturgis in Last Train from Gun Hill, which is a very good Western, with Kirk Douglas and Anthony Quinn.
Yeah, and you didn't play a nice guy in that one.
I was not a nice guy, but it was a great part. You know, in the opening scene, my buddy and I are out in the woods, and we see an Indian lady going by in her carriage, and out in the woods with a little boy, and we start following her, and one thing led to another, and it was it was a catastrophe for her, and her husband turned out to be in another town. Turned out to be Kirk Douglas, and he comes to collect me, and it was a very interesting. We had a lot of fun on that. It was tough, but we had a lot of fun.
You worked with Kirk Douglas in that, and of course, Gunfight at the OK Corral. What do you remember about some of the other stars that you worked with?
I think my very favorite was Katharine Hepburn, and also Spencer Tracy. I worked with Spencer Tracy in Broken Lance, a big Western. It was a remake of a picture called, oh God, I just slipped out of my head. But it was a whole entirely different script at Fox, and then years later they made it as a Western. And Spencer Tracy had 4 sons: Richard Widmark, Robert Wagner, Hugh O'Brien, and myself. And I got to know Spence quite well, and so consequently that even helped me when I did The Rainmaker, because The Rainmaker was my favorite film. That was my 16th movie, and it was a picture that suddenly lifted me to, co-star billing, and I got the Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actor that year for playing Katharine Hepburn's young brother, Jimmy. And it was just, she was a delight. She was a delight. And also, Shirley Booth, Tony Quinn. I played Tony Quinn's son. I did 3 movies with Tony. 2 of them I was his son in, Hotspill and The Last Train from Gun Hill. And he said if we did it again, he was going to put me on an allowance. He was a great guy. They were all great guys. I mean, Dick Widmark, I did 3 pictures with Richard Widmark, and he was the first star that ever really encouraged me. That it was the first actual part that I had was in a picture called Destination Gobi, and he was the star of it at Fox. And he took me aside one day, and he just gave me a lot of very good advice, and really encouraged me. As I said, people think stars are different or movie actors are different, but I tell you, they can be the nicest people in the world.
Now, you're one of the few guys who worked a lot in film and a lot on TV. What's the difference?
I think most people prefer film. I mean, you have much more time. Television is a very quick, it's done so quickly, sometimes you don't have, there's a famous line in All About Eve where George Sanders explains to Marilyn Monroe, she says, do they audition for television? He says, my dear, that's all television is an audition. There's wonderful things done on TV, especially today. I mean, it's really amazing how creative it's all become. I was fortunate too there. I mean, I had the first series I did was a Western called Hotel de Paree. I played Sundance, and the second one I was called Wide Country. I played Mitch Guthrie, a champion rodeo all-around champion cowboy. And then the third one, of course, was the Charmer. That was Angie Dickinson and Policewoman, which was a huge hit, not only here, but even the first year, we were number 1 in Abu Dhabi, of all places, Were you old enough to remember Policewoman?
Yes, I'm old. Listen, I'm old enough to remember Sons of Katie Elder and seeing it in the theater. No,
I was really fortunate. I worked with top directors. I just had it really, it's funny. when I hitchhiked to Hollywood, this is so ironic. The dreams of kids, and I always tell them, dreams can come true. Don't give up on your dream too easily. When I came out here, I had just turned 15 on the way, and I had dark glasses because I equivocated movie stars with dark glasses. So here's this 15-year-old kid having arrived the day before. He goes right to Grandma's Chinese and puts his, my feet in the footprints, and go walking up and down in front of Grandma's Chinese. And I remember, now this is ridiculous, but I remember this, with my dark glasses, thinking, I wonder who they think I am. Seriously. And it was that very spot where, that very area. Now, that's the Walk of Fame now. And they have the stars on the boulevard. And between Greta Garbo and Joel McCrae, that's the very area I walked in. And there's a spot in between them that now has my name. So, and it's just amazing to me, that can happen.
Now, speaking about Joel McCrae, there was a very interesting Western you did with him and Barbara Stanwyck.
That's the first time my name ever appeared above main title, yeah.
Oh, okay.
It was called Trooper Hook. Now, she was a joy. They both were. He was the most down-to-earth guy you'll ever meet. And she was, too. On location, we were out in Kanab, Utah. Beautiful area up there, beautiful. And but it was hot, deserty. And they had one table for the stars and the director and producer and whomever. But Barbara Stanwyck never once sat at that table. She would get her tray of food, and then she'd go sit down with her back to the wheel of some automobile, some truck, with the crew. She had with the crew, and they all called her Missy. She was just the most down-to-earth person you ever met. She was terrific, a real lady, too.
Yeah, and she was from Brooklyn, same place where we're taping from.
Brooklyn.
Yeah, same place we're taping from right now.
Are you in Brooklyn?
Yeah, that's where we are right now when we're taping.
Is there a tree growing there anywhere?
Yeah, a whole bunch of trees in Brooklyn. You have to come out here one day.
Well, I'm referring to a tree grows in Brooklyn.
I know that.
I was not in that film. That was a good film.
Who were the best directors in your mind that you worked with, and why?
Well, I think I love George Stevens when we did Giant. The first director I worked with an actual part was Robert Wise, who directed Sound of Music and West Side Story. Very good director. I worked with Mark Robeson in the Bridges of Toka-Ri. I worked with twice with John Sturges. Joe Anthony, who directed The Rainmaker, I directed it in New York. He was a very terrific actor's director. God, there've been so many, and they've almost all been really good directors. Good top directors.
We're going to have to take a short break. We'll be back in a few minutes. Our guest is Earl Holliman, star of television and screen. Welcome back to the Connor's Corner segment of Ask the Lawyer. With me right now is Earl Holliman, star of television and screen, the actor who made the first Twilight Zone. Let's say there's a kid out there, he's thinking about maybe going acting, but everybody's telling him, no, it's not a good career path. What would you tell him?
First of all, I would tell him he'd have to be absolutely dedicated. He'd absolutely have a passion for it, and he'd also have to have a talent for it. A lot of us, as I said, from the time I was 6 years old, I wanted to be a movie actor. Well, that's the dream a lot of kids have, and today they want to be rock stars or beboppers or musicians or go into different fields. But whatever, it's you have to really have the drive for it, and then you have to work hard, and yet you have to also have luck. And when you get that first break, it's wonderful to get a break, but when you do, you better be ready for it. And that's so you got to train for it. You don't pick up a scalpel and start doing an operation. You don't pick up a hammer and start building a house without knowing something about how to build a house. You got to really be prepared. That's what I tell them. You really have to be prepared, but you have to know that the chances are very slim. So you have to work awfully hard.
If somebody asked you, what performance is Earl Holliman's best performance, what would it be?
I keep going back to The Rainmaker because that was an incredible part. And as I said, I got the Golden Globe that year for the Best Supporting Actor. And there was a lot of talk about Oscar stuff, That was probably one of my best performances. I don't know. I think Last Train from Gun Hill was a very good performance. I did a movie for television called The Solitary Man, which was a lovely piece, a real terrific piece, and about a guy who's been married all his life to his high school sweetheart and has kids, and he comes home one day and she wants a divorce. She wants more space, and it's how do you get a guy who starts all over again from scratch, and it was a terrific part. There've been a lot of things. I think the Twilight Zone speaks well. It's not the most difficult performance I've done, but I don't know. I'd have to really look at it closely. I've had a lot of good parts. Yeah.
Let me ask you something. When you were making Forbidden Planet, when you were making The Twilight Zone, did you have any idea people would be looking at it and talking about it 60 years later?
Well, of course not. No. As a matter of fact, when I was doing Forbidden Planet, I had done a picture called Tennessee Champ. It was the sixth picture I did. I played a punch-drunk prize fighter where I played a little lady baby harmonica in his mouth every scene. He was in kind of a zoot-suited, really odd, off-the-wall character. And there was Shelley Winters, Keena Wynn, Dean Martin. Chuck Bronson was in a small part in it. But it was directed by Freddie Wilcox, who later directed Forbidden Planet. And the part of the punch-drunk prize fighter was such a scene-stealing part. It really was. It was just a wonderful little part. It was not a little part. It was a wonderful part. But it was. They were so impressed with it that he insisted. I was doing Giant I think I was doing Giant when I got the call that they wanted me to do Forbidden Planet, and they sent me the script. And I really didn't want to do it because I just didn't feel right. I didn't feel any great kinship with the character, and I tried not to do it. And in those days, it was very hard to get your money up or get your billing or what. So they offered me a little more money, and it was just difficult to turn down. And I finally did it. And I was uncomfortable in most of those scenes. I just didn't feel I was doing the best of work, with Robbie. It was tough working with Robbie the robot. It's tough working with an inanimate object, when your voice is being fed to you by an uninspired script person, It was just kind of tough. I know I shouldn't talk about this, but I remember looking at the cameraman at one point when I was doing this, and I thought, boy, he knows just how bad I am.
You had one of the legends of Hollywood in that film, Walter Pidgeon. What was he like to work with? Because most of you guys were kids compared to him.
We were all kids compared to him. First of all, I had no scenes with Walter. As I said, unless he was inside that robot, He was a very nice guy. Through the years, I met him. I've met him on other sets. I've seen him, talk to him, and we once had a nice talk about Angie. We talked about admiring Angie. Both of us were Angie Dickinson fans. That was while I was doing Policewoman, and but I never worked. I never had a scene with him at all in that film. So
no, one thing we didn't talk about at all is Angie Dickinson.
I got the part I had done a series called my second series was called Wide Country, and the associate producer was Doug Benton, and now Doug Benton was going to be the producer of Policewoman. Angie Dickinson had done a show on Police Story, The Gamble, I think it was called. And when NBC saw it, they thought, what a great idea for a series. Angie Dickinson, undercover cop playing a prostitute on the streets and the various things that she had to do as an undercover cop. And so they decided to do it as a series. But for some strange reason, they wanted to change the Lieutenant Crowley and make him a sergeant, and also change the actor. They kept the other two guys, but they changed the actor. So they began to talk about who they should get, and Doug Benton suggested me. He said that what they had begun to do is call in cops and ask them to tell their stories, to get ideas for scripts. And Doug said, so many of the cops who came in reminded him of me. He said they all had that kind of similar Midwest background or Oklahoma background or Texas or whatever. they look like, in the early days when everybody were coming out to what was it, the sandstorms in Oklahoma and all that stuff. He said that I had the same kind of quality. And he called me in. He showed some film to Angie, and so they agreed to make the offer, and that's how I ended up in it. I didn't want to do that either. I said, why do I want to play something called Policewoman? It's not called Policewoman and Friend, And he said, look, well, there are going to be 2 stars in it, So he said, you'll be co-stars. So anyway, it was a joy. We started the film. Angie and I we didn't know each other. And we went to work in that first episode, not the first one that went on the air, but the first one we did. And it's amazing. After the first day's work, the first day when they saw the dailies, the film rushes, they came on the set and I talked about the great chemistry between these 2 people, which was amazing because, as I said, we didn't even really know each other. But that chemistry really worked and it was wonderful. They permitted us to do a lot of ad-libbing on that show. And a lot of the sexual underplay or sexual undertones that were there came from our ad-libbing, And no matter what I said, she was right back at me, or what she said. We had great rapport, and we had a lot of fun. It was like going on a holiday every day, going to work. It was terrific. Just great fun. Laughed a lot.
Earl, I understand you're interested in charitable work, and one of the charities that you're working on are Actors and Others for Animals?
Well, I was, for 34 years, there was an organization that was formed in 1971 by Richard Basehart and his wife Diane, and to help people, with their animals. They were concerned about the plight of animals here in California, or in the world. But then Doris Day joined the group, and eventually, 2 years later, I joined the group. And then I was president for 34 years. But I was an active president. I worked hard, but I'm still working. But it was something I was very proud to be a part of. And they're still going after 45 years. I just talked to Sue Taylor, who's the executive director, and I talked to her this morning. And I said, how many animals do you think you've spayed and neutered? And she said, at least 500,000. Since they've sterilized at least 500,000. And she told me they do medicals. They're one of the few organizations that actually will help pay for medicals. A lot of elderly people, the only warm body they ever curl up next to is a little dog or a cat, and many times they can't afford to feed them properly, let alone pay for vet bills. So that's where Actors and Others comes in. And she reminded me of there's a disease, there's a thing called Paree now that if you're a dog or cat owner, you should be aware of it. It's a very severe infection of the uterus of female dogs, female cats. And it can be life-threatening. Sometimes you don't even know what's wrong. A cat can stop, or they can stop eating and vomiting, whatever. But if it's not taken care of soon enough, they can actually die from it. But by spaying them, by getting them spayed, because it's a disease of the uterus. If they don't have the uterus, they don't have it. So they encourage people to do that. And unfortunately, with all the modern stuff that vets have discovered today, of course, costs have gone up. They're very expensive. And an operation like this can cost $2,500, and a lot of people can't afford that. Most people can't afford that. So Actors and Others, for example, they have vets who can do these operations, or vets that they work with all the time who give them good prices, and they can cut maybe $2,500 down to $1,000. Then Actors and Others can then pay maybe $500, and they'll get another group to help. And so, but it's worth looking into. Also, if anybody's really interested in finding out what they do, they have a terrific website called Actors and Others, but it's www.actorsandothers.com. Actorsandothers.com.
It's actorsandothers.com.
Yeah, and it's a very good website. They even have, I think they even have now a live video there showing how neutering and spaying is done. But even with your male cat, your male cat. Well, first of all, a female cat can be spayed, when she's 2 months old, but she's got to weigh at least 2 pounds. That's important. But if they're outside cats, and we discourage being outside cats because too many things can happen to them. But But if they are, then they really they can that should be taken care of immediately because they multiply so quickly. It's just incredible.
Actors and others for animals.
Actors and others for animals. They were originally the only game in town, and then through the years, other actors have become, now there's a whole new group of younger actors, and we were kind of like the old staid bunch, but it's still a very good organization, and they're there daily, and they are helping people, they can't pay totally for all the operations in toto, but they can certainly contribute and they can certainly help, But they do good work here in L.A. and not just L.A., but there's so many counties, all of Southern California, really. Jo-Ann Worley is now the president. She's been the president since I left.
What are you doing today?
I'm retired.
You don't want to act again?
I miss acting a lot. I really miss. I miss acting itself. I loved being an actor. I don't mean the publicity or all that stuff. I just mean being on stage. I love the theater. I did some theater out here at the Amundsen in L.A. I did first at the Mark Taper Forum here down at the Music Center years ago. I did Tennessee Williams's Camino Real. I played Kilroy. Tennessee came to see it 11 times. And then about 3 years later, I played Mitch in Streetcar Named Desire with Faye Dunaway and John Voight. And Tennessee came to that several times. And then I opened a theater. I mean, I didn't open it myself, but I was the investor, and with other friends, I was 60% owner of a theater in San Antonio called the Fiesta Dinner Playhouse. 52 weeks a year, we had all the top stars. I mean, Lana Turner, Van Johnson, but we had all. Van Johnson came 3 times. Cesar Romero came 3 times. June Allison, that's who I was trying to think of. I mean, we had all these great stars that would come and perform for 5 weeks each, and I would go there and do something occasionally. And I love the theater, but I do miss that. I miss it a lot. But I'm at the age now where I don't trust my memory that well. I'd be a little concerned about that.
Thank you for being on our show. And for those in the audience out there, if you ever see some of those old films with Earl Holliman, he's the guy out there who can stand with Joel McCrea, John Wayne, Dean Martin, Burt Lancaster, Kirk Douglas, Anthony Quinn, and you remember him. And we do remember you, and thank you for being on our show.
Well, it's very nice talking to you, Mike.
Thank you, Earl Holliman, for being on Connor's Corner. We appreciate your time.